This is exactly what Project 2025 said.
Oh no,
They
not
said,
the Project 2025 talking
as much
point.
as make it easier to discriminate against people of color, women, dismantle and privatize federal agencies. They most certainly have done that.
They have not done that. I went into the lion's den and was live on CNN last night and lived to tell the tale after clashing with a couple of woke journalists. We're going to break it all down in today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across our media, our politics, and the internet, all from an independent perspective. Up first, guys, we're going to do a deep dive on my experience on CNN last night. First and foremost, I'm already back home here in Michigan. Real quick trip to New York City and back to do the show, the 10 p.m. hour last night. It was kind of cool because you're on the whole hour, basically, so you get a lot more screen time and a lot more time to talk than you'd normally do in a cable news hit. And I have to say, I really like the host, Abby Phillip. I think she tries to be fair, and she has her biases like anyone else, but she does seem to really have a commitment to having different perspectives at the table on her panel of 5 people or so. So she had Scott Jennings, who's a Trump-supporting Republican. She had me with kind of a right-of-center independent point of view. And then she had, I think, 3 left-leaning commentators and journalists. And I knew what I was up against pretty quickly because just moments after one of the segments began, one of the liberal panelists brought up Project 2025 and a bunch of other anti-Trump conspiracy theories. Take a listen to this first clip.
Is Donald Trump about to put all of America's spies out of work? A CIA spokesperson and sources familiar telling CNN tonight that the agency's entire workforce received buyout offers today. How does this work?
This is exactly what Project 2025 said.
Oh no, not the Project 2025 talking point.
As much as we talked about on all these shows for months that Donald Trump said he knew nothing about Project 2025 and he didn't adhere to it, and even though everyone that drew it up worked for him, this is exactly, I went back and looked at Project 2025 tonight. Eliminate up to 1 million federal jobs. Cut federal workers' daily and benefits. Make it easier to discriminate against people of color, women. Dismantle and privatize federal agencies. They most certainly have done that.
They have not done that.
They've made it easier to discriminate.
He has not changed federal civil rights laws. He revoked an old executive order and then kept in place other protections.
It's coming.
So there's a lot there. I do have to honestly just disagree with Abby's framing of the story, which was about reporting from the Wall Street Journal that the Trump administration had offered buyouts to all CIA employees. This is something they've been doing as part of their ongoing effort to downsize the federal government, basically saying, hey, listen, if any of you employees want to resign, we're offering this package. You can voluntarily take it. You'll get 8 months paid of pay continuing after you leave. And they're hoping basically it's very hard to fire people inside the federal government without direct cause that they've done something wrong. But if you just want to downsize departments or agencies, that makes it tough. So they're offering these buyouts. And she framed it as if the whole CIA workforce could be going away or something. But that's kind of ludicrous because only a tiny percentage of employees have been accepting these buyouts. And they know that. I mean, from the other buyouts they had offered, it's about 1% of employees. So nobody was talking about shutting down the whole CIA. It's about trimming 1% or hopefully more, but nobody's talking about getting rid of the whole workforce. And then to have one of the panelists, Gretchen Carlson, who used to be a Fox News host, but I think has evolved in her views to some extent, bring up the Project 2025 thing. Look, I did a whole deep dive on it that I will link to, but this was a telling moment. It is not surprising or proof that Trump is secretly doing Project 2025 that they're seeking to downsize the federal government. That is what basically every Republican president has promised to do. And yes, there are parts of Project 2025, which is this massive project of proposals and policy wish lists from the very conservative Heritage Foundation. There are parts of it that Trump supports and is going to do, just like he did in his first term. He implemented some of the Heritage Foundation's ideas, but not all or even most. Then there's parts of Project 2025 that Trump would never support, like banning pornography. Really? You think Trump is going to do that? Trump has very strongly disavowed the project, and then some of the things, like Project 2025 calls for a return to traditional marriage, Trump has done the opposite. In fact, he specifically had the Republican Party remove language opposing gay marriage, which he supports, from the platform in 2024. So they're obsessed with this Project 2025 thing as if it's some big nebulous conspiracy Trump is going to enact. In reality, it's actually not a remarkable thing at all. It happens every presidential administration on both sides. Ideological advocacy organizations propose policies and ideas to presidents on their side, some of which get implemented, some of which don't. And then, as I tried to point out on air, some of what she's saying is just factually false. It's just untrue. Trump has not made it easier to discriminate against women or minorities. He has tried to remove DEI programs, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, that in many cases are actually discriminatory in their own right. And then he did do an executive order rescinding some old executive orders that rolled back affirmative action. But despite the misinformation that's out there, and I did an episode about this topic that I will also link to, he did not remove anti-discrimination laws, and he kept in place protections for federal contractors that they can't discriminate against their employees. So that is frankly just a fake panic and a false narrative. And I found it funny how when I pointed out that what she said wasn't true, she shifted to, well, it's coming. That's actually kind of a big difference. You went from claiming this thing happened, and I pointed out it didn't, to, well, it's gonna happen. So you're admitting you were wrong? But this second clip from my time on CNN is where things truly got wild. We're gonna react to it after a quick message from today's sponsor. Valentine's Day is on the horizon, and let's face it, men can be tough to shop for. That's why I'm excited to partner with today's sponsor, Exter, who can help you find the perfect wallet to gift the man in your life this Valentine's Day. Their wallets are slim, sleek, and super convenient, with quick card access and built-in technology that protects your cards from scammers who steal credit card information with wireless scanning. Plus, their Finder card accessory is perfect for a guy who sometimes loses his wallet. I wouldn't know anything about that. For Exter's special Valentine's Day sale, you can get 30% off now. Just go to the link on screen or in the description and use promo code BRAD to unlock further savings. You'll be glad you did. Now back to today's show. So up next, we're gonna watch a clip from my CNN panel where a woke journalist crashed out over the idea that federal employees are being offered the voluntary chance to resign and get 8 months paid time off. He called this the Trump administration terrorizing federal employees. Yes, seriously, take a listen.
And this is the kind of crude and ignorant and sort of cruel policy that we see across the federal government. I have friends in every department who don't know if they can pay their mortgages, don't know if their kids are going to be able to stay in school because they might have to move. And these are people who often are, in almost all cases, are patriotic Americans who signed up to serve their country.
But none of
we're
that's going to happen.
We're betraying the people.
None of that's going to happen because of the CIA buyout. They get offered 8 months if they want it. About 1% of federal employees have taken the other buyouts.
You think we don't need the CIA?
But how does that's not what anyone said. A buyout is an option that they can take if they want, and not 8 months paid leave.
They're terrorizing Americans.
It's not terrorizing to get an offer.
You want the tiny violin out for the people being offered.
Well, you may not care about
vacation.
You may not care about
Tell that to
CIA
Americans who can't afford groceries. 8 months of paid vacation.
What does that have to do with it?
For me,
because these people buy groceries too, because they are Americans who buy groceries.
And they're very well
losing
paid.
their job.
And they work for taxpayers. So this guy, Josh Rogan, he's a journalist with the Washington Post. I'm sure he's a perfectly nice guy, but I have to say, I found his takes here hysterical and ridiculous. And that's why I tried to push back on them. It is not cruel to offer people the opportunity to resign if they want to and get 8 months paid severance where they get paid and don't have to work. First off, layoffs happen all the time in regular America. People who work in corporate America that's a fact of life. And many of them aren't lucky enough to get 8 months of severance. And by the way, guys, federal government employees actually make more than their private sector equivalents when you count their very often very extensive benefits. I just found this hysterical and absurd to suggest that you are terrorizing people by offering them the opportunity to resign and get paid leave. Like, that's not what that word means, and you sound hysterical. We'll get into this more later in the show, but it does seem that some of these folks have not learned the lesson and continue to be hyperbolic and alarmist about any and all things related to Donald Trump. And then I got so annoyed when he said, "You think we don't need the CIA?" Brother, that is not what anybody said. We're talking about downsizing the CIA by at least 1% and at most 10 to 15%. That is not the same thing as saying we're going to get rid of all our intelligence agencies, we're going to defund all of law enforcement. Like, you're just obviously not engaging in good faith if that's what you heard from what we are saying. But to be clear, I do have sympathy for federal employees or anybody who gets laid off, but there is no divine right to be employed at taxpayers' expense. And offering people the chance to voluntarily resign is not a hate crime. That's really all I said. That's really all I argued, but that seemed to upset a lot of people online. I got one comment that said, "Watched you on Abby tonight. As a federal employee, your disrespect and degrading comments were offensive. We are people too, with families and careers. We work hard. We don't deserve all the insults and negativity." That comment actually made me sad because I really don't think I insulted anyone, and that was not my intent. I simply pushed back on hysteria and advocated that, yes, we need to downsize our federal government because it is massively bloated and we are spending ourselves into a financial hole. But frankly, there's a lot of entitlement in these spaces where a lot of people think they are entitled to these vast salaries and benefits at taxpayer expense and are absurdly acting like even talking about 1 to 10% cuts is outrageous. It's not. And no amount of shrieking or hysteria will change that fact. Now we'll get into another clip where, honestly, I felt kind of gaslit by some of the Democrats on the panel. Take a listen.
How does defunding the CIA actually make us stronger?
Good question.
My question is, like, if you're going to go out and defund law enforcement, and you gave us hell, Democrats, with that awful talking point that they ran around the country with 4 years ago, but if you're going to defund law enforcement, right, how does this actually make us stronger around the world?
This doesn't reduce the CIA's budget. They're
We're not
offering
talking
people
about
to
that,
take
but
an out.
We're not talking about
and
that.
I think they can afford a 1% shave of the headcount at the CIA.
We're
It's
not
a massive bloated agency.
Just to people understand what you're talking about, 1% is what we are being told at the moment has been the take-up rate. For
How
this.
many CIA...
It's not to say that is what they want. They have said, Doge and those folks, they said they want it to be 10 to 15% of the workforce.
And we could absolutely do that.
So the question is, if you just go ahead and say 10 to 15% of the workforce at the FBI, at the CIA, go away, and you don't have a plan to, let's say you want to replace them with different kinds of people, but you don't have a plan to do that, how does that make us safer?
A, I don't think they want to replace them. I think they want to reduce the size of the government.
So how does that make us safer?
B, well, I mean, I don't know that it makes us unsafe to have a slightly smaller government. B, on this buyouts across the board, I want
to be clear, we're talking here about the CIA and the FBI. I'm not talking about the government.
They are in the government. But
in broad terms, I'm talking about specific agencies that are tasked with national security
and
law enforcement responsibilities.
I think in those agencies and in every agency, for any Republican president, it is a fair assessment that most of the federal bureaucracy, a good chunk of it, is openly hostile to your worldview and your agenda.
That's number one. That is true.
That is absolutely true.
It's ridiculous.
Of course, let me finish.
But finish your point.
And so you could walk in and say, everybody who doesn't support me leave, or you could walk in and say, I'm going to give you the option. If you don't feel like you can support my agenda, here's a pretty generous way out for the moment because you don't have to work here.
Well, that got a little bit chaotic. I just want to say, it is an objective fact, whether Washington Post journalists like it or not, that the federal workforce, the people that work for the federal government, mostly in Washington, D.C., are overwhelmingly left-leaning. They're overwhelmingly Democratic. I mean, this is to some extent reflected by just the political demographics and voting trends of DC itself and its outer areas, but you can also look at, for example, donations from federal employees and who they go to. According to governmentexecutive.com, federal employees donated $4.2 million in the presidential race, and it mostly went to Kamala Harris. All in, 84% of the money they donated went to Harris versus just about 16% going to Trump. So it's just a fact. right, that they lean left. And this guy was gaslighting us and trying to argue that that's not the case. And to the other point that was raised, it just seems absurd to me to suggest that these massive agencies can't get a slight haircut in their personnel without it making us unsafe. And I also think the burden is on them to prove that there's no way to cut 5% of your staff without putting America in danger. You actually have to prove that. We don't have to prove the negative of how this doesn't make us unsafe. You actually have to prove, when you're taking taxpayer money and spending it on these massive bloated agencies, that every penny of it is necessary. And guys, they haven't been doing that for a long time. Now let's get to a part of the panel that's actually getting a lot of traction online in right-wing circles, because we covered the fallout that Democrats are protesting against Elon Musk and his involvement in the federal government. And they had this rally where Democrat after Democrat went up and just attacked him in the most hysterical and alarmist terms. And some of them were just so cringe. And they played this montage for us. And this CNN panel, which again was the liberals far outnumbered the right-leaning people, literally laughed out loud at how ridiculous the Democrats were. Take a look.
Democrats agree that Musk is a problem, but listen to them today. And they have a piñata in search of a stick.
To our Republican colleagues, if you do not see the light, we will bring the fire. Resist!
We are going to be in your face. We are going to be on your asses.
We have days to stop the destruction of our democracy. We have work to do. Tell Elon Musk to take his hands off your money. We don't pledge allegiance to the creepy 22-year-olds working for Elon Musk. We pledge allegiance to the United States of America.
And goddamn it, shut down the city! We are at war!
We will win! We will win! We will win! We won't rest! We won't rest!
Gretchen.
Yes,
So,
they need
Can we
the
play it
Democrats.
again?
The Democrats need a real.
I love this. Even the CNN liberals could not help themselves but laugh at the absurd and hysterical spectacle of Chuck Schumer, one of the Democrats' leaders, going, "We will resist." Like, calm down, Grandpa. There are, I think, actually some legitimate criticisms to potentially be made, and lawsuits will be filed about some of the ways that Trump and Musk are trying to roll back the federal government. I definitely support their goals, but I do question some of their methods, and it will have to be sorted out through court challenges and the like. But Democrats are just taking it to a hysterical level. We're not at war because they are trying to shut down one federal agency. Like, this is hysterical and it is alarmist, and that kind of rhetoric does have consequences and I think is harmful. And I tried to argue that to this panel of left-leaning people and to, more importantly, the CNN audience, that there are legitimate critiques to be made of Trump, but the constant alarmism and hysteria and invocations of fascism and Nazis and all this is not helpful and is actually, I think, profoundly disrespectful, and also discredits any legitimate critiques you might have because people tune you out because you rave like a hysterical person. Here's the message I tried to deliver.
Everyone's like, what just happened?
But do you think the screaming, the Nazi rhetoric, one of the Democratic congresswomen literally called, I think it was Ayanna Pressley, but it was a Democratic congresswoman, literally called Elon Musk a Nazi. Do we really think that kind of alarmism is helpful?
No, I totally agree with you.
After years, don't you think Democrats would learn that just screaming hyperbole about Trump, America's rolling their eyes. They rolled their eyes in 2016. They rolled their eyes in 2024.
You're at 15 every single
2023.
day. Okay? People are going to tune out.
So I actually felt pretty good about that clip because even the CNN host, Abby Phillip, agreed with me. She correctly noted that if you're always at a 15 out of 10 in terms of your fire alarm, your scale, your doomsday clock, and your rhetoric, at some point people are going to be like, okay, well, they're warning us every day that it's the end of democracy, every day that fascism is here, that this latest act is just so terrible. People are going to stop listening. It's the boy who cried wolf phenomenon. So then, if Trump actually does something crazy or does go too far, people aren't going to take those warnings seriously, and that's a real problem. So hopefully that point resonated with the audience that needs to hear it, which I think is the CNN audience and some of the people on that panel. And that's what I was trying to do, is bring a different perspective. And overall, I really had a good experience, really enjoyed it, and would love to go back. We did also talk about Trump and some of the really controversial remarks he made, floating a possible U.S. invasion and occupation of the Gaza Strip. Take a listen to my pushback on that idea that came out of Trump yesterday.
Well, also, Scott, what happened to America first?
So I
this
think
is the guy who was supposed to take us out of the endless wars, said he's against nation building.
You're stealing my
he
talking
railed
points.
against I am.
I know.
What about the American families who don't want their loved ones who serve in our service to go fight another war overseas in the Middle East that he has no clear vision for? But he talked about U.S. boots on the ground. That's a slap in the face to MAGA voters who specifically rejected the old neoconservative ideology.
But not only
He
that,
sounds like Liz
what about
Cheney.
the
I'm in Michigan. I know so many people who voted for Trump. They voted for him because of the border crisis, because of inflation, because of the economy, not because they want to go on another military adventure, this time invading the Gaza Strip.
But a lot
It's
of Arab
insane.
Americans in Michigan also voted for Trump.
Well, that vote
so how are
aged
they
poorly.
feeling?
To the lefties who voted against
said what he
Kamala
was
because of
gonna
this
do.
issue, it aged poorly.
So, like I said in this clip, I think it's, if it's just something he said and he doesn't mean, or he's just negotiating and he's throwing things out there, then it's not the end of the world. But if we were actually to do such a thing, I think it would be an absolute disaster. And I don't think it's what Americans voted for, right? They want America first foreign policy. We don't want more endless wars. We don't want more nation building. Like, look how that went in Afghanistan and everywhere else we've tried it. And the Gaza Strip, which of course is part of the Palestinian territory and their conflict with Israel, is probably one of the most deeply complicated and tragic places in the world. Trying to control it or fix it militarily would be an absolute calamity and a quagmire that we would, I think, end up deeply regretting getting involved in. And I think the Trump administration is probably realizing that, and this idea they floated is not going down well, even with their strong supporters. So the White House already appears to be rolling it back.
His entire public career criticizing foreign entanglements, nation building, sending American troops to fight abroad, particularly in the Middle East. This plan seems like it could ultimately involve all of those things. Can you explain this reversal and how building and owning Gaza squares with America First foreign policy?
I would reject the premise of your question that this forces the United States to be entangled in conflicts abroad. The president has not committed to putting boots on the ground in Gaza. He has also said that the United States is not going to pay for the rebuilding of Gaza. His administration is going to work with our partners in the region to reconstruct this region. And let me just take a step back here, because this is an out-of-the-box idea. That's who President Trump is. That's why the American people elected him.
And if you ask me, that's a good thing. But what do you guys think about that and about my appearance on CNN more broadly? Let me know in the comments. I would love to know what you guys think. Do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. I actually have a really great episode planned for tomorrow that I had to bump to do the CNN episode. Do hit that like button. Do subscribe if you haven't yet. And we'll talk again real soon.